Hello, and welcome to another episode on the Total Space Network. I'm Rich LB, and with me today are my co-hosts Ryan.
Hello.
Jack.
Hi, everyone.
And Miko.
Hello, hello.
Today, we are having an interview with a very special guest. This special guest has served quite a bit of time in the US Air Force, also featured as Mission Director of Inspiration 4, where they managed to raise a whopping total of over $243 million for St. Jude's, which is absolutely phenomenal. Scott Kid Poteet. Hi, Scott. How are you doing today?
Hello, guys. Cheers. It's nice to join you guys. Appreciate what you all do for the space industry, for sure.
Thank you for those words, Scott. They mean a lot to all of us. And without further ado, I will hand over to Jack from our team to ask you the first question.
Hi, Scott. How's your day been?
It's been great. A lot of traveling. I'm actually in Boston to do a speaking engagement with MIT on a panel on Thursday. So a little bit of traveling on my end.
Firstly, we'd like to ask about one of the most important aspects of this mission, and that is a global St. Jude initiative, which has already begun. Using funding from the Inspiration 4 mission, we understand that the Polaris program, will really start to shine a light on this global initiative going forward. But is there anything that you can share with us today about this?
Absolutely. You know, our relationship with St. Jude is crucial. And as we said at the conclusion of Inspiration 4, our work's not done. And it's not going to be done because we're trying to align with St. Jude's vision of no child dying at the dawn of life. So I think what we're trying to do now is continue to raise funds, which is crucial for their mission. And we proved successful with Inspiration 4. And we'll continue to bring more attention and more visibility on their initiatives to include the global initiative. So, you know, ideally they're taking the funds that we raised with Inspiration 4 and putting that towards their global initiative. And it's crucial that they can have the avenues available to take their life-saving protocols and bring them to developing countries. And so, you know, as we continue this partnership with St. Jude, we're going to help them along the way. We're going to try to take it to the next level with everything that we accomplished with Inspiration 4, and continue to raise awareness and funds. And we have some pretty cool objectives on this next mission that's going to help that cause.
Yeah, that's awesome. As mission pilot for Polaris Dawn, could you tell us a little how you ended up becoming part of the crew?
You bet. So I have a relationship, friendship with Jared that goes way back. And so when he came up with this concept with Inspiration 4, I kind of fell in the role as the mission director on the Inspiration 4 side. That roles and responsibilities, you know, it was the whole gamut, whole spectrum of tasks associated with that, from, you know, getting coffees for the crew all the way to sitting on mission control and being on the recovery ship, which was probably one of the most exciting experiences of the entire journey. But this is truly a partnership with SpaceX. These discussions for Polaris Dawn as we move forward started well prior to Inspiration 4, and ultimately we set out to build out the objectives needed to accomplish to ensure they can make that transition to a successful program with Starship. And ultimately that's the vehicle that's going to take us back to the moon and eventually Mars and beyond, making it accessible for everyone. So I'm very blessed to have had that experience with Inspiration 4 and now moving forward being the mission pilot for Polaris Dawn.
It must be a stark difference to the joystick and buttons in the F-16 to go into touch screens in the Dragon module, I imagine.
Absolutely, yeah. It's drastically different for sure. But there's still elements of what we do in the F-16 and the priority community that will translate well. So time will tell to see how that all plays out, but excited for sure.
As you said earlier, you've been buddies with Jared for a few years now. How did it feel watching him go up from where you were in mission control during the Inspiration 4 mission?
It was certainly an emotional roller coaster. I mean, from the very beginning, honestly, we really didn't know what we were getting ourselves into in the beginning of the project. And we didn't have much time to waste based on the timeline that SpaceX had set forth. In fact, we joke quite often, they're the only space industry company that can actually shift a launch to the left earlier, which is ultimately what happened with Inspiration 4. But like I mentioned, it was an emotional roller coaster. Everything about it was amazing. It was a long journey, starting from the selection process, going through that entire process of selecting the crew to make sure that we ultimately provided an example of how space can be accessible to all, and that was the ultimate goal for the project itself. We knew a lot was riding on this mission. And based on our partnership with SpaceX, we knew it was a no-fail mission. So there was an intense focus on both sides, and thankfully it all played out, and it was a successful mission that hopefully everyone can enjoy with the Netflix documentary.
Yeah, the Netflix documentary was great. I've seen it, and I've been thinking about checking it out again. It was so good.
Well, we got another one in the works, so we're excited for that one as well.
I just want to cut in there real quick and say you guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
too.
think the crew, Hayley made you cry for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So, when your friends came home from space, did you cry?
There was certainly a climax of emotion on the recovery ship. We had worked so hard, and that was certainly the highlight of my journey behind the scenes, working as the mission director, was being on the recovery vessel. As things built up, we were there in mission control for the launch. We immediately jumped in an aircraft, flew to Hawthorne to sit mission control for the 3 days of the mission. Didn't get much sleep. Immediately, 12, 16 hours prior to launch, we jump back in the jet, fly back to Florida, and I jump on the recovery vehicle and watch the entire splashdown. And being right there when the hatch opened, it was, it wasn't a dry eye, in the vicinity of that capsule. So it was a great experience for sure.
Fantastic. Going full circle from standing outside to sitting in it, ready to launch. Have you always dreamed of flying in space? Has it been something that's been with you since you were a little kid, prior to all your experience in the Air Force?
Just based on how the space industry has developed with regard to astronauts, I never really thought it was possible. Obviously, I loved everything about aviation and space. I was an 80s child, so I grew up in the shuttle era, went to launches, all the movies that came out in the 80s with Top Gun, The Right Stuff, Star Wars. It certainly was the catalyst for me to get involved in the aviation industry, but I didn't have the grades. I wasn't cutting the mustard to make that cream of the crop, that top pyramid for being a NASA astronaut. But I pursued aviation through ROTC. I had some challenging experiences with motion sickness that I was eventually able to get over. But if there's anything that I can kind of glean from that experience is taking a challenge, and if you're committed to overcoming those obstacles, nothing can stand in your way. And that's ultimately what I was able to accomplish flying fighters. It's certainly a control issue as well. I love having the joystick and throttle to be able to control that machine. And it's certainly a passion that I share with Jared and the team as far as flying fighters still today.
Leading on from that, how excited are you to fly with Sarah and Anna from SpaceX? Both their vast experience must bring a lot to the table.
I mean, you couldn't ask for a better crew. You got Sarah, you got Anna, you got Jared. Sarah and Anna, I mean, lead space operations engineers at SpaceX. That's one of the premier jobs, I would say, in this industry. You've seen them in action on the Netflix, the documentary. You've seen them in action on the launches, the coverage from SpaceX. They're ultimately responsible for the company's new astronaut training program, for all the missions that you've seen with commercial, with Inspiration 4, Axiom 1, all the NASA Crew Dragon missions to include Demo 1, Crew 1, they were all a part of. They've got an immense amount of experience in mission control and operations, and they taught Jared, how to fly Dragon. So we couldn't ask for a better crew to be a part of. And obviously Jared he's an accomplished pilot. I have immense trust in his capabilities and who he is as a person. And ultimately what that does is there's great chemistry between all four of us, and that is crucial. And we're going to build upon that as we start this training program shortly. And it's just going to be a great experience, and we're going to ensure a safe and successful mission.
Yeah, I couldn't really think of a better crew. When we were doing some research before the interview, we noticed that the flight plan is to go to a highly elliptical orbit and then gradually lower to around 500 kilometers and do the EVA. But I'm interested, are you going to do several orbits in the highly elliptical orbit that goes through the Van Allen belts, or will it be just one orbit?
So that's a great question, and something we continue to work on with SpaceX. As you mentioned, it will be in a highly elliptical orbits initially. As we work through this mission design and profile with SpaceX, the idea is to push the envelope. That's one of the primary objectives, is to see how we can continue to push that envelope and test the performance of Falcon and Dragon. And it's all within the elements of safety is the number one priority. Slight reductions in margins for stage 1, stage 2, but nothing that is out of the ordinary for how they execute at SpaceX. It's standard, what we refer to in the military as TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. These are all things that are familiar for SpaceX, and they've executed on other missions, for example, Starlink launches. But as you mentioned, the idea is to strive for that low Earth orbit altitude record of 1,400 kilometers. So we're going to initially start off with a 1,400 by 190. And as you mentioned, we'll bring that down. How many orbits we do, it all depends, and we're still working through that protocol. But it's an assessment of radiation, what the impact is to avionics, to ensure that, we're assessing all the recoverable faults for those avionics, and obviously the impact to humans, to our bodies. But the initial assessment is we have minimal concerns, but working through all those trade-offs with our conversations with SpaceX. But it looks like everything's positive and working towards that 1,400 apogee. And as you mentioned, we'll bring it down somewhere around the 500 to 750-ish by 190 to be able to continue the mission and execute the EVA from that altitude.
Yeah, reading about the mission, just the missing facts up on the website, I think that the rough target was 4 to 5 days. You might stay up there, depending on everything, like you say, whether it's a perfect orbit insertion, it might be a little bit short, it might be a little bit longer, depending on how things go. But the longer the better, really, and then the more data you can bring back. So it'd be absolutely amazing. Speaking of the EVA, we know there's no plan for an airlock that the plan is to depress and repress. Previously in February and again in March, Polaris has mentioned that the EVA suits were still very much an unknown as at that time. Here in the end of April, is there anything more that you can share with us concerning the EVA suits? 'Cause I know you've seen like a rough mock-up of them, I believe.
We have. Every time we go out there, it's a show and tell with their suit crew. Talk about a smart bunch of people, man. It's amazing what they've been able to accomplish and what they continue to plan for. It's a really cool show and tell every time we go, because they show us something new that they're working on, technology development. Ultimately, they're focused on two things with the suit. One is the mobility, and the other is thermal. So as far as the mobility is concerned, they're working on the shoulders, the elbows, the wrists, the fingers, the hips, knees, even the boots, to ensure there is mobility once that suit is pressurized. I refer to it as the Frankenstein suit because, in the F-16, in the test world, you have a Frankenstein jet. You kind of piecemeal different technologies together to see what works and what doesn't when you're talking about those TTPs, those techniques and procedures. And that's exactly what they're doing with the prototype suit, is they'll have one type of joint on this shoulder and they'll have a different type of joint on this shoulder that's potentially pleated, just to try that different mobility to see what works, what doesn't. Very thorough process. They go through this 9-stage readiness procedures, anywhere from the suit design all the way to qualifying an EVA suit. So it's a neat process to watch. I'm glad they're working on it and not me. But we are seeing some pretty cool things with regard to the bladders, the different types of mobility with the pleats, the rotational mechanisms, the technology, the cool stuff that they've come up with. And there's always gadgets. I would be remiss not to highlight the fact that SpaceX is going to come up with something cool, whether it's the cameras, the lights, the gauges, the watches. It's going to have some really cool elements that we're excited to show.
Are there any gadgets in there that you'd love, but they've just said no?
Nothing yet. It's all cool stuff.
Right, moving on. Are there any custom integrations being made to Dragon to accommodate Polaris Dawn?
So Dragon, we are talking about the tentative plan of using resilience again, which Jared is familiar with. But ultimately, there's going to be minimal modifications. It's going through its refurbishment, and they've already started working on some of the modifications to include, there's a trunk mod that they're working on for the Starlink terminal. But ultimately, we're trying to figure out how to maximize the cargo space for the COPVs, for oxygen, nitrogen, nitrox, and as well as the science and research experiments that we're looking to accomplish. And they're obviously going to do their continued analysis and assessment on the impact that a depress will have on the systems, all the systems of Dragon, to ensure it's safe.
Is a selfie stick outside the capsule an option to see the EVA?
It is an option. It is something we're talking about. We certainly, there's various elements to the EVA, but one of them is just the continued inspiration of showing the public what that's going to look like. We want to share every single moment. If it was up to me, it'd be like the Truman Show. I don't know if you guys even remember that movie.
I do.
24/7, having 24/7 access to what we're doing, I think it's great. And we ultimately want to provide that continued inspiration. And one of them is going to be the EVA. We're going to capture as many elements of that as possible, whether it's a CubeSat type camera that's released that has 360 and be able to Wi-Fi data link that back to the world to show off what that EVA is going to look like.
Yeah, I bet the Starlink terminal will actually give us some pretty good views from there. But continuing on the theme of custom integrations, will we see a return of the Cupola for Polaris Dawn?
Man, as much as I'd love to be able to see the Earth from the potential altitude that we're striving for, no one's seen that since Gemini 11. I think it was 1966 by Pete Conrad and Dick Gordon. To be able to see what that Earth is going to look like from 1,400 kilometers would be pretty amazing, and having a cupola to do that would be awesome. But unfortunately, the forward hatch is where we're going to translate and execute the EVA. So that's going to be a hatch versus a cupola. And I think we'd rather have the hatch than the cupola for the purpose of doing the EVA. But that's the current game plan.
And where did the idea for the EVA during the Polaris mission come from? Was that just a culmination of SpaceX's development, or did you guys have any input in that?
Well, with Inspiration 4, ultimately our goal was to make space accessible for all, being the first all-civilian mission to space. But we knew we couldn't stop there, so we had to figure out, based on our partnership with SpaceX, how do we up the ante? And that's kind of where we transitioned to this more operational mindset focus, with a focus more on innovation. So based on conversations Jared and Elon had regarding what is needed technology and innovation-wise to to bridge the gap between those low Earth orbit missions with Falcon and Dragon to get to Starship. And so, immediately EVA was one of those technologies, because ultimately, when we colonize Moon and Mars, we're going to need hundreds, if not thousands, of these EVA suits. And granted, the prototype they're developing now, that technology is going to evolve. But some of the technology that they're currently working on, elements of this suit, will be integrated in future suits, making it very purposeful to ensure that we do have that ability to continue our space exploration to the Moon and Mars.
One of the things being tested during the Polaris Dawn mission will be the laser communications with Starlink. Is there anything that you might be able to share with us about what the test might look like? And to add to this question, recently we saw some news from NASA say they are funding Starlink testing in orbit. Are these tests part of the NASA funding program?
So to answer your question, no, the funding is not from NASA. This is all part of the Polaris program, independent of what NASA is currently working on. But I will take a pause here and just highlight the fact, what an amazing accomplishment what they're doing with Starlink and the recent articles you're starting to see about countermeasures to their ability to just fire and thwart off Russian jamming. That, coming from a military background, that is absolutely amazing, and something we should all certainly admire. And we've seen some recent impacts that kind of tie back to our relationship with St. Jude on some humanitarian events that we were able to participate in recently by taking some of these Starlinks over to Poland to be able to use them in Ukraine. And it's just amazing technology, and we're hoping to capitalize on that and continue that development and R&D. So the purpose of our objective utilizing Starlink terminal and laser communication is first to establish a laser communication link for the first crewed space vehicle. And then secondly, continue to demonstrate that high bandwidth capability that Starlink has by downlinking media and some of the science that we're going to accomplish. We do have some surprises that we're working on to demonstrate that connectivity, but it's still a work in progress, because who knows by the time we launch how many Gen 1.5 satellites they have in orbit that we'll be able to utilize and create that network mesh with the router and the laser terminal that's in our capture and our Dragon, talking with all the various Starlink satellites. Hopefully, it's a very high level of connectivity that we can share as much footage, videos, as well as photos with you guys on the ground.
wouldn't it be great to see if you could actually see the crew streaming Countdown to Space, the Inspiration 4 documentary on Netflix?
I love it. That's a great idea. We might have to. With the utmost humility.
A little follow-up there. You say, like, with launch and all that, are you any closer to narrowing down a launch date? Is it just a person in the at a corner with a calendar saying, can't launch then, Starlink launch then, Starlink launch then? Are you any closer to narrowing down a launch date?
So right now, it's no earlier than 1 November. A lot of that is predicated on certain development elements. You can probably speculate the suit being one of them. So we're keeping our options open. We certainly want to focus and accomplish the mission objectives we've set forth. So we are willing to slip. So I wouldn't be surprised if it does slip. But again, we're shocked each and every day of the accomplishments of SpaceX. So if they're able to trim some of that fat on the calendar and get it back down in November, we'll be ready. And that's our goal. So we're going to set forth our syllabus and training plan to meet that objective.
Yeah, I'm all too familiar with things being delayed. Whether all it takes is a storm to wipe things out, and then it's not this week, it's not next week, it's next month.
Absolutely, and it's certainly in that we're not set up for success when it comes to winters in Florida with getting a week's worth of flying in.
One thing I remember, I think it may have been in the Netflix documentary that Jared did tell that he wanted to pilot the spacecraft, but he couldn't. So are you going to be able to manually control Dragon, or will that lower the fuel margin too much?
We're fighter pilots. We want to control everything, anything and everything. So we're working on SpaceX to allow us a little bit of stick time. We'll see. It's a fully autonomous system, and that's a true testament to the professionalism and capabilities and attention to detail that SpaceX has. So we'll see if they let us. But it would certainly be a rewarding experience for sure. But I'm sure Jared's going to get the first crack at it. So we'll see for sure.
Just following on from that, in previous interviews, Jared has always gleefully brought up your invasive ICP procedure and how the rest of the team is delighted that you volunteered for this. And that yourself mentioned that you've earned to keep this mission. We sense there's some kind of story or inside joke here. And is there any funny anecdotes behind this? If not, do you have any funny anecdotes from your time with the Polaris program so far with the team?
No, I mean, that's, I think there were a couple elements. Yeah, exactly. It was a funny story when we started with Inspiration 4. We had the opportunity to accomplish some science and research experiments. So during that initial introduction, they're going through the slides, and you can present it to Jared. There's this option to do this experiment. Jared's like, yeah, that's all good. That looks good. Until it got to the lumbar punctures for some of the non-evasive, that's considered non-evasive ICP experiments. And he's like, time out. Nope, we're not going there. But I'm certainly willing to try anything. And I feel blessed to be in this position. So I want to be able to give back as much as I possibly can. I am a debt of gratitude to have this opportunity, and I'll continue to contribute any way possible. I'm a healthy guy. I try to stay fit, and we're certainly on this paradigm shift, this revolution in the space industry with regard to commercial space travel, which is certainly opening doors. But there's still a lot to accomplish. And one thing that was brought to our attention is this invasive ICP experiment. Once it was presented to us, it was, there's a lot of regulatory approval that we still have to go through. But it was certainly a possibility, the fact that all these doors are starting to open up. And we have a little bit more of an opportunity within the commercial industry, vice government with NASA. So we're going to take advantage of that, and it's something that is necessary to continue to further the cause for space exploration, especially for long duration, because that's one of the number one concerns. And so we got to make sure that we're prepared and we're able to, as humans, press on back to the moon and Mars and beyond.
Excluding the ICP procedure we mentioned earlier, do you have another favourite science experiment or multiple perhaps?
Yeah, so we're talking to a lot of universities, institutions, organizations, nonprofits, to be able to select as many and as impactful science and research experiments as we possibly can find. Ultimately, we got two objectives. One is to enhance our understanding of how space has an impact to the human body, and then we'll continue to benefit healthcare back here on Earth. So right now, we've got lined up experiments about radiation, anemia, antibodies, cancer treatments, deconditioning of the body, motor sensory impact of space, disorientation. As far as what I'm interested in, based on my history with air sickness, flying fighters, I'm all about the disorientation, the sensory motor impairments, space adaptation, just to see, what that's like and how I can contribute to that research. Jared and I are pretty big on our KPIs, our known performance indicators when it comes to running, because we're always doing challenges with mileage and stuff like that. And we're right now we're tasked to wear these garments, hexaskin garments that have biometric sensors in them. So we can have some competitions wearing those and see who's got the lower heart rates. But all fun stuff and all impactful that hopefully contributes to our two ultimate goals, and that's the impact that space has on the body, as well as trying to contribute as much as possible to healthcare here on Earth.
Answer a little follow-up question. You're saying about radiation now. Is there a limit where the SpaceX team just go, nope, can't go that high, too much radiation?
Absolutely. So that's part of the discussions right now with the mission design conversations that we're having with SpaceX, is when you consider radiation, especially when you go through either the lower portions of the Van Allen belt or South Atlantic anomaly, there's an impact to the avionics on the Dragon, as well as the impact to the human body. And those are both being assessed and analyzed to ensure that we don't do harm to either, system, if you will. And that's all part of how high we can go and how long we're up there. But ultimately, we're going to make the right decisions with a priority on safety and still continue to push that envelope.
Absolutely. Don't want to fry any electronics.
So, for the Polaris Dawn mission specifically, what are you looking forward to the most? And on the flip side of that, what aren't you looking forward to?
Oh, man. What am I looking forward to the most? This is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I'm definitely not going to take anything for granted. I'm going to try to embrace everything that we go through, to include the challenging training. We're kind of breaking it down into three categories, or three phases, if you will. We're about to kick off kind of the Systems 101, where, we're going to go through everything that Inspiration 4 crew went through. Systems with the Falcon 9, with Dragon, contingency operations, emergency procedures, just to ensure that we're all familiar, and it's also to build that teamwork. Granted, Sarah, Anna, and Jared have got that licked. They know everything about the systems, so I got to play catch up with regard to phase 1. Phase 2 is everything specialized to our mission based on the objectives, with the altitude performance, with the EVA, as well with Starlink communications and the science and research that we've set up on this mission. So focus and have specialized training for that. And then last, we're always going to do our fun stuff. We're going to climb a mountain. We're going to do some EVA training that is specific to what we're going to accomplish, to include some scuba diving. And we're going to fly fighter jets. Always got to incorporate the fighter jet flying somehow, some way, because that helps that checklist procedures and working together and trust building. So there's, that's a long answer to a short question. The fact that everything along the way, but I would say if I was forced to choose one thing, it's going to be the launch. I love, thrust. And they got a lot of it, close to 200,000 pounds per engine. So I think that's going to be a kick in the pants, something I've never experienced and I'm looking forward to. I would say that the one thing that I'm not looking forward to is probably time away from the family. It's a big commitment, but we've voluntarily committed to this objective, and ultimately it's going to favor humanity and our desire to explore the stars and continue the space exploration.
And fast forward into that launch day for Polaris Dawn, you're all suited and booted and ready to go. Give us 3 songs from your launch day playlist.
Oh man, I'm going to be delegating this responsibility to my family. So I got 3 kids and a wife, and we were actually talking about it the other day as far as what songs, because I have the ultimate hammer to cross any of these songs out. My oldest, I think she's into Harry Styles and some band called Rex Orange County. My middle daughter, she's big into Drake. So I'm sure there's going to be a Drake song in there, and my young son, who's actually he's a big SpaceX fan. He's into Garden of the Galaxy soundtrack, so Mr. Blue Sky. He also likes September.
Some more songs up your street, I imagine.
Yes. And then my wife, she'd probably choose something like John Denver, Chris Tomlin, or some James Taylor. But if it was left up to me, I'd do something like classic rock, some Led Zeppelin. I also like Maroon 5.
AC/DC.
AC/DC, there you go, some old school.
There is something I'd like to ask personally. What was it like flying with the G-Monster?
I did not anticipate that she was going to grab, the stick and pull that hard, so to speak. She was not afraid. And it was, I think it was fairly obvious throughout the entire documentary that she embraced this entire experience, whether it was in the capsule, doing flips on the St. Jude call, or flying the fighter jet, even the climb of the mountain. I mean, she's got a prosthesis, and we hiked up Rainier, and it was snowing, it was deep snow. She's got all this heavy gear on, and she wasn't afraid. She's powering through. And flying with her, she definitely wasn't afraid. And good thing there was some limitations on that aircraft. Otherwise, she may have G-locked me, which. But it was a good experience, and she enjoyed it. For sure.
Showing you up.
Yeah, exactly.
Will you need to get some tips from Hayley on the centrifuge?
Thankfully, I've already been through the centrifuge when I was in the Air Force. In fact, actually, I'm scheduled to go twice now. One with the training, and then ultimately there's going to be this ground testing phase for the ICP. If we get it approved, I'm going to have to go back. So hopefully I'm going to be a seasoned centrifuge flyer on that one.
And just going back to your Air Force days and everything, did you ever get a chance to fly your dream aircraft, or is the Dragon module going to be it?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's hard to compare the two. Obviously seeing Earth from that high is something that you can't match. But having the ability to fly the F-16 and control it, I mean, it literally, the stick barely, I mean, it moves like that much. And it, you think about it, and it immediately starts flying, starts turning based on the inputs that you provide. So it's hard to compare the two. I definitely have an affection for flying the F-16.
A little, question about both missions, Polaris and Inspiration 4. Was it ever considered to go to, the ISS, for example?
We were offered the ISS, but we thought it was just as important to be able to continue to evolve innovation and the steps necessary to continue to bridge that gap between low Earth orbit and get us back to the Moon and Mars, and onto Starship from Falcon 9 systems. So ideally, we kind of wanted to focus on those operational objectives based on how vital they're going to be for that long duration, that deep space travel. So hopefully we can accomplish that with what we've set forth with the Polaris Dawn mission.
And as you mentioned throughout, pushing the absolute boundaries on this current flight, there's potentially set to be another one or two before they actually could move on to Starship itself. Are you hoping to be on every single flight, or I know you'd be heavily involved regardless?
Yeah, I'll be involved regardless. We're embracing what's in front of us, and obviously that's Polaris Dawn. And ultimately, we'll continue to develop from the lessons learned, not only from Inspiration 4, but Polaris Dawn, and eventually get to that third mission, which will be the first crewed Starship mission. Who knows? I had no idea we'd be in this seat, a year ago when we were going through Inspiration 4. So I'll be supportive no matter what, and I'm just looking forward to being the mission pilot for Polaris Dawn.
What would you say to the people who aren't as excited about spaceflight as we? So the people who would say it's just rich people going to space.
There are so many benefits for us exploring the stars. You look at the history of space travel and in space exploration, and some of the technologies and innovations that have come out of those experiences that have benefited us back here on Earth. And another example is just our partnership with St. Jude, and ultimately how we're striving to continue the awareness of their mission and to help develop some of these technologies that will benefit the patients and the families of St. Jude. Starlink is a perfect example. Having that technology, and we've seen it already in the Ukraine, having that technology accessible will only improve connectivity for everyone around the world, to include developing countries. And what that connectivity does is provide telemedicine, to be able to communicate with some of those experienced and well-trained doctors, can provide some of that support for those families that are deep within a developing country that would never have those resources otherwise. So there are many purposes for us to continue the space explorations, to push the envelope, to develop these innovations that are going to help humanity as a whole.
But if you'd like to learn more about the Polaris program, head over to polarisprogram.com. There's all the information about the mission and everything on there, and a whole lot more. Is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap up or anything?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, and we look forward to a great mission ahead.
Pleasure's been all ours having you on the show. It's been absolutely fantastic chatting with you, and hope you can join us again in the very near future. If you'd like to support what we do, head over to patreon.com/Total Space. Support what we do here, the people we chat with, our special guests, and so much more. And don't forget to like and subscribe right here on Total Space.
Exploration, especially for long duration.
I was going to say, I absolutely jumped then. That bang in the background. Don't know what the hell that was.
Sorry, that's someone dropped their luggage over there.